verse 11 has been good because what it's enabled us to do is to go back and look at Old Testament stories that articulate what Jude is trying to teach us. In verse 11, Jude says, "Woe to them, woe to the apostates, woe to the false teachers, for they have gone the way of Cain." Remember, Cain is the self-righteous legalist. He is functioning under approbation lust, and he killed his brother. Gone the way of Cain, the self-righteous legalist, have run greedily in the era of Balaam. Remember, Balaam was the false prophet that loved money and things. And we studied him last week, and how he died the sin unto death by fighting against Israel. And our last phrase here, "and perished in the rebellion of Korah." The word for perished actually is apololumi, and it is in the aorist tense. We're going to find out why it's in the aorist tense, because they were put to death. Apololumi means to be put to death, or we have here perished in the rebellion, or revolution is a better word, antilogia. Antilogia means revolution. And then we have Korah. Korah is the man who instigated this revolution. And so if we're going to catch this story, we need to turn back to Numbers 16. Turn all the way back towards the front of your Bibles to Numbers chapter 16. Numbers chapter 16. We're going to look at this. We're going to find out, what about revolution? What about rebellion against authority? See, the problem in our nation is we're going down under liberalism, which is going to lead to absolute socialism. And socialism is only the bridge that will lead us to communism. Did you know that in the United States right now, all we need to go full-on communism is a couple of different things? We either need another civil war to be totally communist, or we need a financial problem. We need another financial catastrophe, like the stock market crashing that we've seen before. Either one of those two things will put us under a dictatorship, a full communist regime in the United States, because either one of those things will instigate a martial law. And we are on the threshold in the United States of needing to do something. And people are out here saying, well, we've got to get rid of the leadership. They're ruining our nation. And we all know that President Obama has spent more money than all of the other presidents combined. That means if you took all of the money that all of our other presidents in United States history have spent, President Obama has spent more than all of them combined in his 2 sessions. And so we can see that we're in trouble, and we see that if things don't change, then the United States may be a goner. And there are many people right now who want to start a revolution in the United States to overthrow the governmental powers and reinstall the Constitution. And we understand that these things may be good and right. It may be the thinking of the patriot to want to be under the Constitution and want to have a literal interpretation of the document and want to reinstall a type of government that is conservative. But my friend, revolution is not the answer. We're going to find this out in our Bibles tonight. It is not for you and I to take our rifles and march to Washington, D.C. and shoot politicians. Can you understand that? It's not for us, although some of them deserve to be hung. Did you know that some of the things the politicians are getting away with now are treasonous? And the sentence for treason is death. And so it is not our job to instigate a revolution. No, it's not. And we're going to find out what happens to the revolutionary here in Numbers 16. Number 16. Now Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram. We have 3 characters here, 3 main characters: Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. they're going to be our main characters in the story. The sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. In other words, these three men, we have Korah, we have Dathan, and we have Abiram. They instigated, and they got 250 of the leadership of men that were well known to go with him. They said, well, this is what we're going to do. We want you to join us. There will be no way that they will have to overthrow them, because we'll have too many people of substance on our side. And they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 of the leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron. Remember, Moses is the leader, and Aaron is the priest, and said against them, you take too much upon yourselves. They say, you take too much authority. You take too much leadership. You're telling us what to do, and we don't appreciate it. For all the congregation is holy. Every one of us is set apart, he says. Every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? These men were jealous. They were jealous because Moses' leadership ability, remember, Moses was about to become the next Pharaoh. He had leadership ability. And Moses gave up his job as leader of Egypt, and he went out into the desert and became a goat herder. And then God called him and he said, go get my people and lead them out of the land. And so Moses was raised up, and God raised him up for the position to lead Israel. And then we have Aaron. He was the high priest, and these men wanted to take their jobs. Korah wanted Moses' job, and Dathan and Abiram wanted the Aaron's job. So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face. He knew right away this was going to be bad. Moses was a very humble man, even though he was a genius. He was a military leader. Moses was also a musician, many do not know. And he also was a writer, a composer of music too. He fell on his face because he knew this was going to end badly. And he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near him, that one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near him. And he goes on and he gives instruction. And then they come on, and I want you to verse 14. Skip down to verse 14. He says, moreover, this is Korah, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of the fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. They had refused to come up out of their tents and talk to Moses because he did not lead them to the promised land. Now, was it Moses' fault that they didn't go to the promised land? No, it wasn't. It was because they failed all the tests in the wilderness under the faith rest drill and many others. They refused to trust God even though he had delivered them through the Red Sea. I want you to go down in verse 28, number 16:28. This is in the morning, the next day, and Moses is going to set up a test here, and he knows God is going to deliver him from this revolution. These naysayers, these jealous men who have rallied against him with the children of Israel. Verse 28, and Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. In other words, Moses gave orders. And he told people what to do. And he used his position of authority. And he used it greatly and in a mighty way. And he may have been a leader who didn't beat around the bush and who wasn't nice. And these men resented him. But guess what? Was he sent of God to do this job? And we're going to find out the answer is no. Yes, yes. Verse 29, if these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. In other words, if they live past this day and they continue walking around like normal people and they just die of old age, I guarantee you that I am not your man. And these guys aren't. But, verse 30, the big B-U-T word, but, conjunction of contrast, if the Lord creates a new thing and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now it came to pass when he finished speaking these words that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, with all the men, with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. Verse 35, and fire came down from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Remember, these were the 250 noblemen that stood against Moses. Now, isn't it amazing that the revolution that they sought to incite, the Lord came down with discipline and removed these families. Remember, these were men, women, and children, all Korah, and Dathan and Abiram, all their families and all of their possessions, and then the 250 noblemen that came to stand against him. And that's not all. Read on in verse 36. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy. And he goes on, and I actually meant to go down to verse 41. Verse 41, the people were complaining because they said Moses had killed their people. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. Can you believe this? They had just seen the ground open up and swallow the revolutionaries, and now they're going to complain against Moses? How smart is that? Not real smart, eh? And you would imagine today, how authority-oriented are most people? Most people are whining and crying about the president, and they're crying about what's going on, and they can't believe it, and they're wallowing around in this thing, and they're slandering and maligning. They're in the same place, friends. Look, authority is sent by God. Authority. We have authority in the United States. We have a president who is an authority. And yes, we are going to suffer by association because God has sent a switch. He has sent a switch to America to tan our hides, and his name is Barack Hussein Obama, and he is your president. Now, are you going to endure chastisement with the rest of the children and complain and agonize and wallow and call names and complain and do all of these things? Are you going to stand up? And are you going to receive God's grace in the middle of this suffering? And God can pour out his grace upon us, even though those around us are suffering. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron that they turned toward the tabernacle of the meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. This is Shekinah glory. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And they fell on their faces. So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire in it, in the altar, and put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them, for the wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun." Then Aaron took it, as Moses commanded, and ran to the midst of the assembly. And already the plague had begun among the people. So he put the incense and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living. This plague was spreading so fast that people were falling like flies. And he stood at the line where the people were falling out. So the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incidents. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. Isn't it amazing that these people didn't learn anything from history, and history wasn't that far past? It had been the day before. So we're going to look at the doctrine of revolution, and we're going to look at some points on revolution. We're going to learn some things about the history of the Bible, and we're going to learn some things about United States history. Point number one, neither the Word of God nor history justify revolution. In other words, if you want to start a revolution, you're not going to find it in the Bible. You're not going to get bullets for your gun in the Bible off of this deal. As a matter of fact, you're going to find out that the Bible says, pray for your leadership, accept authority, pray for our president, pray for our leadership, pray for their wisdom, pray for our freedom. And we're going to find out Jesus came to earth. Jesus walked among men. He came to his country, which was Israel. And when Jesus was in Israel, they were in the fourth cycle of discipline, teetering on the brink of the fifth cycle. And Jesus did not one time say, pick up your sword. We're going to start a revolution. I was talking to my children the other night about this, and I brought up the issue. How do you make gunpowder? I asked them, and they surprisingly knew the ingredients. They knew the ingredients, and they said, "Well, you need some sulfur, which is right. You need sulfur. You need some saltpeter, and you need some charcoal." And I said, "Well, how do you get that?" And I said, "Well, you know." They said, "Well, you can find sulfur. It's just like mining, anything else, salt, sulfur. You can find it. So you can find sulfur, and you can find it in the Promised Land. How do you get charcoal? You just burn some wood." That's right. And the best charcoal for gunpowder is made out of pine rosin, and dried out into charcoal and crushed. And then they said, "Well, how do you find saltpeter?" And this one's tricky. This one's tricky. I don't know. How do you find it? Do you know where you find saltpeter at? And Preston knows now because I've told him the answer. You can find saltpeter in its original form in bat caves, because bats, when they use the bathroom in the floor of the cave, the gases that come off of that collect on the cave wall in crystalline form, and all you have to do to get saltpeter is go by and scrape that off the wall of the caves, which there are many caves around Jerusalem in the Promised Land and the limestone cliff. So here in Jerusalem, in and around, we have all the ingredients for gunpowder. Gunpowder. We know that, gunpowder didn't really come into operation in warfare until about the 12th century. So Jesus is sitting on top of the biggest technological breakthrough of warfare that man ever knew. Do you think Jesus knew how to make gunpowder? Yeah. Yeah. He didn't have to wait and let the Chinese do it. He could have done it. He could have said, he could have went by the blacksmith shop, which there were coppersmiths, there were bronze smiths, there were blacksmiths in those days. He could have said, make me a pipe. I'm going to build a mortar. And he could have drawn out a little diagram, and he could have had that blacksmith pour him out a nice bronze cannon. Remember the bronze laver in the temple? How huge it was? It was big enough. It was huge. Do you think they could have made a cannon? Yeah. You think they could have made cannonballs? Yeah. And he could have took his disciples, and they could have went out and gathered all the ingredients for gunpowder, and they could have kicked the Romans' rear. They could have taken their cannons and set up and just started fighting outwards and cleared the land. But you know what Jesus did? He taught the Bible. He didn't make guns. He taught the Bible. He taught truth. He taught spiritual truth. He taught about millennial truths. And he spread the gospel. He went around and he evangelized. And so we understand from Jesus that revolution, even though you see what happened in Israel, they went out under the fifth cycle of discipline in 70 AD. All the Jews were scattered from the land. Revolution was not the answer. Guess what was the answer? Spiritual. It was a spiritual answer. Not only did the people need to be born again, they needed to form a pivot of believers so that God could begin to bless their nation. And so we see that neither the Word of God nor history justify revolution. There are 3 legitimate reasons for fighting. See, it's good to be a fighting man. Did you know that if you're married, you are required to be a fighting man? The Bible says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. Did you know he sacrificed everything that he had for the church? And so we see for freedom, point number 1, 3 legitimate reasons for fighting for freedom. Now, I want to try to narrow down the application here because you can distort these, okay? And if you want to, you'll distort this to fit your needs, see? But if someone is about to enslave you, you are better off fighting for your freedom than you are to be shackled and put on a slave ship and shipped off. You understand? The Africans that were enslaved would have been better off to have fought to the death than to be enslaved and brought here. As a matter of fact, there is a tribe in Africa who could not be enslaved. And did you know that they had the attitude of Patrick Henry? Do you know what Patrick Henry's famous phrase is? Give me liberty or give me death. And the Africans that were not enslaved said to themselves, we will fight until it looks like we're about to be overcome. And if it looks like they're going to take us, we will kill our families and then we will kill ourselves. And we will never be taken as slaves. Because they had the thought of freedom and they knew its value. They knew to become slaves was worse than death. And so there is point number 1, to fight for freedom. And isn't it amazing that we owe so much debt to the communists right now in China that they could ask for our children in slavery, and we may be required to fight under point number 1, but we won't go on with that. Point number 2, for independence. And I want to use our war for independence. We know it many times in we did not overthrow the government of England. You get that? In a true revolution, you fight until the leadership is toppled, and then you install a new leadership. You get that? That's what a true revolution is. And so when we fought against England, we just ran them off the coastline. We kicked their butts and said, get on your ship and sail out of here. We don't want to see you again. You get that? And once they sailed away, we saluted and said, so long, suckers. And then we had our independence. We no longer had taxation without representation. And so fighting for independence, and this is the United States against Britain in the Revolutionary War, or War for Independence, if it were named better. For existence. If someone right now the world is against America. I don't know if you know this or not. The people of the world hate Americans. Most people don't know this because Sweetness and Light pastors do not mention this to their congregations. They say, well, we need to love everybody. And they don't understand that if Taliban controlled their building, that every Christian inside would be mutilated and dismembered and killed. And so we may end up fighting for our existence. And there are countries right now in North Africa that Christians are killed in, and many of the missionaries just tell them, well, just let them do whatever they want with you, and we'll pray to the Lord. And these Christians are going around with both of their hands cut off. They need point number 3. They need to learn how to shoot rifles and build barricades. And when those Muslims come in there to cut their arms off, they need to kill all of them but one to send back with a message that we will not be denied our existence. We will fight for our existence. And so point number 3, reason for fighting for existence. Now, don't distort those because I know you can. Point number 3 in our document, revolution leads to mob violence. Mobs cannot think nor achieve anything worthwhile. If you happen to go to sleep before I get through this, remember this point. Never join a mob. Never join a mob. You know what mobs are good for? Good for catching bullets. These untrained policemen can shoot into a crowd of people and they can kill you pretty easily with their weapons. And we may see this in the United States. If right now there was an impeachment, I guarantee you there would be groups of people who would incite mob violence. And you need to understand that mobs cannot think. Because of that, they are neurotic and they become violent. And you see this many times. You can see the films of looting and all the things that happen with mobs. And so if you see a mob, go the other direction. Revolution means apostasy and lack of doctrine. Isn't it amazing that in the United States right now, if we had a large pivot of believers who were sound in Bible doctrine, how that we would not even be thinking about revolution in the United States. But because of apostasy and because of lack of teaching on the part of pastors, we have the idea of revolution. Isaiah chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's crib, its stall. But Israel does not know. My people do not consider. Alas, a sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a brood of evildoers, children who are corrupters, for they have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked to anger the Holy One of Israel. They have turned away backward. Why should you be stricken again? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faints. Also Isaiah 59:13 and Jude 11, our passage. Point number 5 in the doctrine of revolution. Revolution is anti-God. I've actually said that revolution is satanic. We know the first revolution of angelic history was caused by Satan. Satan revolted against God's authority. Isn't that amazing? The head demon, the fallen angel, Satan, the cause of the whole angelic conflict, instigated a revolution against God. We also see this in Isaiah 31:6. Point number 6. Revolution is caused by failure in the right lobe. Jeremiah 5:23. Remember, the right lobe is where you apply doctrine from, and the right lobe can be attacked. The right lobe sucks in false doctrine. It has a vacuum. And when you don't put true doctrine in front of it, it sucks in the false. And so revolution is called by failure in the right lobe. Jeremiah 5:23. But this people has a defiant and rebellious heart. They have revolted and departed. Mental attitude sins destroy the right lobe. Drug addiction destroys the right lobe. Fornication, remember, it builds scar tissue on the heart, the right lobe. Alcoholism destroys the right lobe, etc. Keep on. You understand what destroys the right lobe of the soul. Jealousy is a motivator of revolution. I would like to commend all the extreme right-wingers for not firing a shot. If you didn't know it, the right-wing conservatives are the ones that have all the guns and ammunition. Not just guns like a gun in the gun cabinet, but guns as in military-style guns and stockpiles of ammunition. Not so found on the left. And so we have many thousands upon thousands of people in the United States who are ready for war, but they have not fired a shot. And so I would like to commend them in not instigating a war. Jealousy is a motivator of revolution. Guess what will happen if there's an impeachment? Guess who's going to be jealous? The left. And you're going to see mob violence. You're going to see people marching into your homes on the streets. You're going to see the destruction of property. You're going to see all kinds of chaos. And so jealousy, somehow what you have belongs to them. You get that? Just like the fight over a loaf of bread in the bread aisle or over a Black Friday. This is a motivator. And you see our verses, Isaiah 11:13, 1 Kings 12:19, 2 Chronicles 10:19. And you should have, just go to point number 9 here. We didn't skip anything. Yeah, we did. Number 8's not on there. Let's try that again. And that's another one of them backward deal. I apologize. I got called out to work between point number 8 and 9 and 10, and that's what happened. Point number 8, the communication of Bible doctrine is designed to stop revolution. Amen for that. Thank goodness for that, because I was ready to start a revolution myself. When they start messing with your freedoms like they have been lately, it can make a man mad. And but guess what? Retaliation is not the answer. The answer is the spiritual eye and gap. You know, the grace apparatus for perception. Point number 8, the communication of Bible doctrine is designed to stop revolution. Ezekiel 2, 3 through 10. Remember, God sent Ezekiel to his people to communicate doctrine. Point number 9, anything achieved with revolution could have been achieved without revolution. We have to look at history, and I want to give you 2 examples. One positive and one negative. In England in 1812, a bill of reform was passed, and they experienced reform in government without revolution. In other words, their diplomats, their politicians were able, through the democratic method, they were able to work together and reform their government. They were experiencing all kinds of trouble, and the people were ready to revolt, but they got together and said, look guys, we can fix this thing without violence. And so in 1812, England passed a bill of reform, and they were able to do that without violence. Now, the French Revolution. Many of you have heard of the French Revolution of 1795. In the French Revolution, people were killed upon the thousands and hundreds of thousands, and once the violence began, it began in what it ended up was class warfare. And it was the poor against the rich. And what ended up happening is all the noble people were hung and strung up and guillotined, so that by the end of the revolution, there were no more people left to rule that were prepped to rule. And we found out that Napoleon finally had to step in and become a dictator to settle things down. But here we have hundreds of thousands of people who died in revolution, and not to mention the fact that there was huge amounts of human suffering that went along with this. You can imagine your nation being at war with itself. And so the French Revolution came to the same thing, except hundreds of thousands of people died in the time being. Point number 10, national trauma is a result of divine institution, the overthrow of divine institution number 4. We know divine institution number 1 is volition or freedom. Divine institution number 2 is marriage. Divine institution number 3 is family. Divine institution number 4 is nationalism, patriotism, free market economy, capitalism. And anytime you overthrow the nation's leadership, guess what? The nation is at chaos. Can you imagine if our entire leadership was overthrown right now in the United States? You know what would happen? Everybody would be arguing about who's going to go to power next. The left would be saying, no, you voted us in. We're going in power. The right would be saying, no, we're doing Republicans. The far right would be saying, no, we're doing Tea Party. And the far right would be saying the Constitutionalists would be in there. And so it would be absolute trauma in the United States if we had the overthrow of our establishment number 4 right now. So I want to read to you a couple of points that I want to finish out with tonight. And I want to show you why the United States is in so much trouble. Because there are so many people out here that did not listen to the doctrine of revolution tonight. They do not know that it is wrong to revolt, and they do not understand that we patiently endure as long as we have our personal freedoms intact and we're not being enslaved and in chains. Here's why, one of the reasons that men are ready to vote. Men and resources cannot be exploited apart from freedom. That means that you can tax a man as long as he's got his freedom. You can give him a fair amount of taxes to pay, up to 30% of his income, and he will pay it as long as he is able to go out here and work and make it up. He will not revolt against you. But if you take away that freedom out here and you keep the taxes up over here, guess what's going to happen? It's just natural for man to revolt against that. It says men and resources cannot be exploited apart from freedom without reaction. See, the carnal man's going to react to that. Get it? And this reaction is often violent, even to the point of revolution. So we may not start the revolution in the United States, but we may find ourselves in one. You understand? Because the carnal man is just how he's going to react to being taxed and having his freedom taken away. Another point I want to share with you, this is off page 742 in the notebook. When human power and privilege are monopolized by a few, that means the elite, the upper echelon, they're untouchable, they're monopolizing, people become oppressed. Now, isn't it amazing that we are going to have Obamacare crammed down our throats within the next year, which is forced socialism? I don't know if you know that or not. If you're involved in Obamacare, if you make no money, you're going to get health care for free. If you make a lot of money, you're going to pay for the guy's health care that makes no money. You get that? So that means if you don't make any money, you get it for free. Why not just give up? Right? And so we see here, when human power and privilege are monopolized by a few, isn't it amazing that Congress has voted themselves where they don't have to be under Obamacare? Only the citizens. And so we see here we're being monopolized. People become oppressed. Or when their freedom is limited, their opportunity is limited. They may even be in slavery. And so we see here some of the things that are going to instigate a revolution in the United States of America. And I hate to see it happen because it's going to ruin. We're going to be a third world country by the time it's over with. And there's nothing we can do out here to stop it once the first shots are fired. We are all going to be involved. And it's going to be the destruction of our country if it happens. So here's the issue, friends. Tell your friends to get into Bible doctrine. Give them a tape. Tell them the answer is on there. The Colonel taught about these things 30, 40, and 50 years ago. People just aren't listening. And so you and I have the doctrine of revolution, and we understand it. And we understand what to do and what not to do. What to do is gap it. What not to do is do not revolt. I want to thank you for your attention and attendance tonight.